Thank you again for attending tonight's Rock County Civics Academy program. Our ability to provide these presentations is solely dependent upon the financial support we receive from our sponsors and you, our faithful listeners. Our presenting sponsor is Havana Coffee on Milton Avenue. This program would not be possible without the ongoing support of the Italian House and Big Radio, WCLO, WJBL. Supporters include Ragnar Ltd. And Ragnar Software, the John Westfall family, Dan Plushik's Janesville News Report, American Awards and Promotions, Stockman Property Development, LLC. If you believe in our mission, we welcome your financial support. Materials explaining our mission and financial support opportunities are available at the registration desk or by visiting our website, commonsenserockcounty.org. And with that, turn it over to Rich Gruber, tonight's moderator.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome to this evening's panel discussion. The topic tonight is something that is on the cusp of being a major event here in the Janesville area, and we're excited to present the folks that we're going to have tonight talking about what we've entitled the Woodman Sports and Convention Center Escape to the Finish Line. And joining us tonight to talk about the topic and what we can hopefully plan for in the future. At the far end of the table, I'd like to introduce Bill Mears. Bill, welcome. Bill is a commercial real estate broker, longtime broker here in the Janesville area. He probably is the expert on commercial property and the ins, the outs, and what's possible, and frankly, what's not possible. So, Bill, glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass on Julie for a second. The etiquette thing, ladies last in this particular case. Next to Julie, though, I'd like to introduce Bill McCoshen. Bill is the managing partner of the Janesville Jets, and the Janesville Jets are a hockey organization that essentially brings young people the opportunity to qualify for Division I scholarships and play a competition from around the country in a setting that perhaps in 2 years it may be a different setting. We'll leave it at that. To my immediate right is Duffy Dillon. Duffy is an attorney here in Janesville. More importantly, though, Duffy is a longtime sports enthusiast who has had a pretty distinguished track record of bringing youth sports facilities to fruition here in the Janesville area. So I'm very pleased to have Duffy as a part of our panel tonight. Now I want to go back and I want to introduce Julie Cubbage. And Julie's the general manager of Rockstep Capital. They are the owners of the Janesville Mall, what we affectionately call Uptown Janesville these days. And Julie and Rockstep Capital have been kind enough to host us this evening. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time in this setting. And we chose this setting in particular because, as most people understand, the proposed site for the Woodman Sports and Convention Center is right here at the Janesville Mall. And it's going to represent a significant investment in the community when and if it comes to fruition, and that investment is going to have huge spin-off effects potentially at some point in the future. Thus, the question tonight that we're going to explore with each of our panelists is, it's escape to the finish line. What should we anticipate once we get a little bit closer to that end? I want to start it off, though, with Bill McCoshen as the managing partner of the Jets. It's got to be an exciting time for you. Tell us, what should we be looking for over the course of the next weeks to months to fruition when this thing happens down the road?
Well, we're in the third period. Game's not over yet. I want to thank the Civics Academy, Rich, Paul, Dwayne, Dan, for putting this on tonight and giving the community an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Woodman's Sports and Community Center. They'll be located right here at the Janesville Mall. There's a couple big steps left to go. The first of which will be the bids. The bids will be returned in a few weeks here in the city of Janesville. The hope is that they will be at or below the $50.5 million budget. And then the city council will act first on the bids and then on what the city contribution will be, I think, at their first meeting in January. So sort of the third period's going to go pretty fast. It's like the other team pulled the goalie and they're putting the pressure on. And, you know, the project's not done yet, but we've made an unbelievable amount of progress in the last 5 years to get to this point with a tremendous amount of support from the entire community. So, you know, my gratefulness to the entire community, the people that have written checks and decided to sponsor this, the people that have done other things to try and help move this project along. It's going to be a game changer for Janesville and I think the entire area. And you know, I hope these next 2 steps go well so that we can get to a groundbreaking sometime in early spring.
I do want to come back and talk about what some of those steps are, and I want to make particular note that we did invite representatives from the city to be here tonight. And our hope was that they would be able to get into some of the specifics as it relates to the bidding on the project and next steps from a city perspective. We'll lay out some of those things from our knowledge base as we go along in our conversation. And hopefully there'll be a little bit more clarity as the evening goes on. I want to mention to the audience that if you have questions that you would like to have addressed by our panelists, you should pick up one of the question cards that were available at the registration desk. And please put your question on that card, and if you could, for my benefit, print or write legibly, and we'll try through the course of the evening to get as many of those questions answered as we possibly can. Phil Mears, you've been in the commercial broker realty business for a number of years, and you've seen a lot of changes in the Janesville community. There are some of us along the way who, with some trepidation, look at the Milton Avenue corridor as an open blank canvas that can be redone with the right palette and the right person behind the brush. What do you see as the opportunities that this particular project is going to open up for us in the immediate area?
Yeah, well, it's a good point you started out with. Milton Avenue Commercial Corridor is getting a little long in the tooth, especially the further south you get down towards the main drag towards this downtown area. It's gotten a little rugged and tired and worn out. Some of the commercial buildings are 40, 50 years old, believe it or not. If you go back in the history of maybe, what they originally were to where they are now, they're still old buildings occupied by perhaps newer tenants. I think I picked up the Wall Street Journal had an article on Monday. The headline, "Zombie Malls Linger On as Owners See Value." And the whole article was about malls being acquired by large investment groups or very wealthy investment groups. And they buy malls and with the intent of extracting value out of it for their own business. I think that the opposite of that is Rockstep, which is looking at developing value at the mall versus extracting it. So we're really fortunate to have that kind of community-oriented investor as the owner and working as a partner in this project. I'm already seeing an impact, even though it's not even here yet. I recently put a deal together that's going to help a company tear down their old building and build a new concept. You've seen the exclusive company building is being redone now into a multi-tenant building featuring Domino's. I'm not sure who the other tenant is going to be. And then that horrible schoolhouse used car lot building is gone, which is right next door to the exclusive company. So the impact is there, and it's going to continue. The old car dealership that was on the market since about 2018 used to be the Pontiac dealership. You guys are long-term residents. That's been torn down. That was purchased by a developer with no real specific plans. So it's going to make a big difference in terms of how Milton Avenue begins to reinvest, rehabilitate, and just get better. The village is going to get better looking. I think, too, it's interesting in terms of what's going on in the retail world. You'll notice if you go up down Milton Avenue or Highway 14 or just about any place within Janesville, the retail space is full. We don't have vacancies other than Toys R Us. Everything is backfilled, and what's happening is there's still a demand for retail space, and we just don't have it. So, I don't know if that
And
gets
that sort
at
of
what
begs,
you-
that begs the next question, which I want to address to Julie Cubbage from Rockstep Capital. There are those, if you follow the business world, that are arguing that retail malls, as we have known them, are on their last legs. They're not going to be here in the future. This is a large facility, and if you walked in tonight from either direction, you'd see that there's opportunities here, a lot of opportunities here. Is retail the future for Rockstep Capital and their investment in this area, or what does the leadership at Rockstep Capital see as the future immediately, in the short term, and in the long term for Uptown Janesville?
Mixed use, definitely mixed use, not just all retail, but services and entertainment. Those are huge factors in bringing a dead property back to life. Since the announcement of the Woodman Sports Complex, we've had family entertainment reach out to us. We've also, I'm currently working on a large deal that would impact the north end, remaining 55,000 square feet of the former J.C. Penney's building. And again, it's entertainment, it's not retail. And I think that's what people need to understand is retail is different now. This is the world of Amazon. You can go online and pretty much get whatever you want. So the retailers that are in brick and mortars, those are the retailers that are trying to survive, and they know what they're doing. Kohl's has been very good about going forward, working with Amazon, doing the things to drive customers back into their stores. I bet a lot of you shop there and you have Kohl's cash to use, and then you come back and you spend your Kohl's cash again and again. So those are the retailers that are going to survive. And the retailers that don't want to, get into this 21st century and get into the online and do what the customers are asking for, they're not going to succeed. So you need to listen to what the consumer is doing and what the consumer wants.
You raise a really interesting point, and that is that the mixed-use development for this particular mall, just as you see in malls across the country, seems to be the wave of the future. You don't have to go that far to see that concept being developed. Westtown in Madison is a good example. I can take you to malls all over the country that have struggled, and frankly, they're finding new life in mixed use. Everything from housing to healthcare facilities to the other end of the spectrum, entertainment opportunities. A lot of emphasis is being placed on youth sports activities in some of the malls from around the country. Duffy Dillon, you've been extremely active in the youth sports community for quite a while, and I give you credit for being instrumental in the development of a lot of our facilities today. Do you see a future in this type of development having a positive impact on the availability and types of youth sports that are here?
It's the $64 million question, because every youth sports facility is unique, because every youth sports facility is located in one spot. And so as background, I'm a Janesville resident. I was with the JYBSA, Janesville Youth Baseball and Softball Association Board for 15 years. People from Janesville know the Janesville Youth Sports Complex. And I kind of walked this path that the Jets are walking 15 years ago, because we had a facility that was old and dying and needed to be refurbished. And we worked out, the city had the youth sports complex available, and there was a standing deal that for any youth sports group that wanted to go out there for $1, you could have as much land out there that wasn't developed and then develop it. And the city would throw in for infrastructure, so roads and lights and bathrooms and stuff like that. and then the sports groups had to pay for the stuff above it. For background, so the experience in us developing that facility was, let's build a 10-field facility, which we did, and those of you who are familiar with it, you know about it. But starting out, the plan was we want to do tournaments. We had been a smaller organization. We want to grow, we want to do tournaments. We want to grow and we want to add younger kids. We want to grow and do a bunch of things for this community, with our primary focus being on our leagues and the kids from Janesville who play in that program, not people coming in from out of town. But we wanted to run a tournament venue too on weekends, which is what is proposed for the Woodman Center. And our experience was irregular because when you are a new facility, you run into other people have their schedules already set. They may not want to divert to your new facility. That's number one. Number two, they may have other options. They're going to have competition out there, so you might not be the best option. Number three, to get people to come to your new facility, either you have to have a stellar facility, which I think we have in Janesville, but we had ongoing competition with the likes of the Woodside and in the Dells, or plenty of other places that have tournaments. I mean, you can't go to a location now. Those of you who've been on the interstate, DeForest put, I think, 4 or 5 million, no, maybe upwards of 10, 30 million, somewhere in there, into that facility you can see from the interstate. It's not busy year-round. So you can have gleaming facilities that are not being used, and you can also overbuild your facility, and you can price yourself out of the market. And what I mean by that is, at least from the youth sports perspective, I'm also an accountant, and what I like about accounting is not doing the calculation. I like the theory of how to run a business and what the numbers tell you about what the problems are with your business and what the issues are that you got to deal with. And from an accountant's perspective, if you're a youth sports group, so the Janesville Youth Hockey Program is the program that I worry about the most with this project. Not because they're not managed by good people, but because they have a few revenue streams right now that they're going to lose. They have concessions that they get. Basically, for any youth sports group, you have the player fees, whatever you raise from the players, whether that's player fees or raffles or whatever the parents have to kick in to cover their costs. And then you have third-party fees. So what people buy at the concession stand, if you have that, what people pay to come to tournaments, that parking, that kind of stuff. And as I understand so you, as a program, you go, well, I got a bucket from my players, I got a bucket from other places. If I don't get money from other places, I got to raise the money I need to pay for my ice time or whatever else from the players. So in this deal, the city is going to be, I think, taking all the concession revenue, so the youth hockey program won't get that anymore. That's one hit to your non-player cash revenue. They're going to host tournaments, but they got to pay $6,000 to run the place, and they have expenses for that. So really, you're only going to take the revenue from the teams coming in. I don't think that's a huge moneymaker for them. I hope I'm wrong about that. But on the JYBSA board, we were fearful all the time that the internet is fracturing your attention spans. The internet is taking kids away from all kinds of activities and all kinds of sports. We were fighting to keep kids in the program. We fought to keep our player fees at like $100, $110 throughout the time I was on there, because we knew there's a concept of price elasticity, and if you raise the price $10, people might not play. Or even at the youth sports complex, if people on the west side want to participate, they got to drive half hour there and back. If I'm on the east side, it's 3 minutes for me there and back. And I knew as a board member, it's costing me a lot less to play in this program than it's costing other people. So we were always really price sensitive, and we had the third biggest raffle in the country, in the state. We're making $75,000, $80,000 a year on that to subsidize things. We had a big concession operation and everything else. So when you take that away and you rely on player fees, I think that the inevitable outcome is either they will have to raise more money through sponsorships and raffles, that kind of thing, or on the players. So my concern is even a little bit of a price increase diminishes that demand. And so you're asking, well, how will this place do? I think that the main user is the Jets and the local users. My concern is that hockey's projected in the pro formas that hockey will grow, and we know with a new facility it might, but it might also cost them more, and it might hurt their participation, and I just don't see a lot of discussion about that. And if that falls out, you still have the other activities, but the facility is then being marketed essentially for outside use, which you have a lot of competition to deal with, and if you can't outbeat the competition, you're not going to have the type of activity that you're looking for.
Bill McCoshen, question to you. As this was put together, this is a public-private partnership, and as it's been discussed through the years, there's a heavy reliance on the facility being available for youth sports. How is the Jet organization going to be managing, I guess, the utilization of the facility to make sure that there's a balance there? Or is that in your plan?
It's the cities. Yeah, so we're a tenant. We're actually the second largest user group behind JYH. They use more ice than we do, considerably more.
Yeah.
So it's the cities. Maybe it's probably useful for the group to sort of understand the history of how we got here.
Absolutely.
5 years ago, if you go back in the archives of the Janesville Gazette, you'll see that they had talked about a $15 million facility. It was going to be 50% city money and 50% private sector. Okay?
Is it 5 years already?
It's 5 years.
I can remember the city council meeting where we had this conversation.
Yeah.
In December of 2019.
So then the project changed. COVID hit. Then it was 30, then it was 45, then it was 60, and then it got whittled back to 50. So the project has sort of changed over time. But the thing I want you to remember about this, at the time, the city was going to put in 50% when it first started. Today, if everything goes the way it currently is laid out, the city's contribution will be 35%, not 50. So taxpayers are actually getting a pretty good deal here. How did that happen? Well, a lot of people got together and went and worked really hard and got money from the state and they got money from the federal government that nobody anticipated 5 years ago that would be part of this project. It allowed it to be a two-sheet facility, which does make it more attractive for tournaments. You're not going to attract tournaments. Hockey's sort of my second life, and you're not going to attract tournaments in a single-sheet facility. You're just not. Unless you're Eagle River. And by the way, that's not a single-sheet facility. They have what they call the ice cube right next to the dome, which is why they get so many tournaments up there. It's also an iconic building. But we were able to do a convention center as part of this, and that's why the Convention and Visitor Bureau has been pretty actively involved in this. And the third piece of this that, Bill didn't mention, the Rock Step contribution almost never gets talked about in the press on
Thank
this.
you.
So depending on your current valuation, the Sears building is worth anywhere from $2 million to $4 million. Call it 3 to be safe, right down the middle. That's being donated to this project. Nobody's paying for that, and it never gets added or properly taken into account in the capital stack. It should. If we had to go out and buy that building and knock it down, Bill can tell you it's at least $2 million, probably closer to 3. Now, Jets have been around for 15 years. I don't remember when Sears was open. Maybe some of you do, but it's been a long time. That's been a white elephant for a very long time, looking right at you on Milton Avenue when you're driving the main thoroughfare here. That building will come down. There'll be something beautiful that will replace it, that will bring people in. I don't know the baseball model as well as Duffy does, but I can tell you that's not his experiences in how hockey works. If you got the shiny new object, tournaments will come. If it's run by a professional operator who knows what they're doing, tournaments will come. That's not an issue. As it relates to JYH, their deal with the city is separate from ours. Here's what I can tell you about their current deal. In our lease agreement with the city of Janesville, they get the concession stands. That's what Duffy's talking about. I think it's important to note that. 95% of their concession revenue comes from Jet games. They don't come from Bluebird games or youth hockey games. They come from Jet games. We're totally cool with that. That isn't the model that they wanted going forward. They wanted to go to a tournament model. I don't know if that was the right decision or the wrong decision. Maybe it'll get reviewed before this whole thing is done. But this facility has to work for youth. That's the whole point. It has to work for the kids of this community. They have to have somewhere to go. They have to have somewhere to recreate, whether it's basketball or volleyball or hockey or figure skating or whatever it may be. There has to, and this is right in the center of town. The other thing Duffy brought up, heck, 15 years ago when we came here, that whole east-west thing, that was real. And it's still real here in town, right? This is dead set in the middle. There isn't an east-west. You couldn't get any more centrally located than this facility. So, I've been a proponent of it from the beginning. I want to repeat in front of everybody. The Jets never once, not once did we threaten to leave if this thing didn't happen. This is our home. This is where we were always going to be. Not once did we say if it wasn't this spec or that spec, would we take our team and go somewhere else. Not once. We want to be part of this community. We've worked our tail off to get to this point to make sure that this thing could be a reality. Again, there's 2 steps left, so it's not a reality yet. But when it gets here, Bill can tell you this, We already know about businesses on Milton Avenue who are either going to upgrade their facility or sell their facility to somebody who is going to upgrade it. There's hotels on the docket because of the buzz around this facility. What this is gonna do from Janesville, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, I was Commerce Secretary for the state of Wisconsin for 4 years, so I did economic development. This type of project brings activity, not only sports tourism here, but it brings workforce here. Parents want something for their kids to do. You'll be able to show it to them when they're driving down Milton Avenue thinking about taking that job at Prent Corporation. They're going to drive right by the Woodman Center and say, "Holy cow, look at that thing. I want to be part of that. That's something special." So I kind of got on my soapbox a little bit, but is it overbuilt? You know, we don't even know what the bids are yet. I mean, the 50.5 is sort of our max number. The hope is it'll come in lower. The hope is that this is fully constructed by contractors here in Janesville. Why wouldn't it be, right? Why wouldn't we keep the work local? I mean, there's so many positives to this facility that it's, I could go on for 2 hours all by myself, but I know we got a whole panel.
And we got a whole panel, and I think we want to be clear for the audience too, that the bids are out on the street as we speak.
They are.
There was a pre-bidders conference here last week, I believe.
Yep.
And there was a fairly large attendance of potential contractors. Large enough that the original due date for the bids was pushed back by a couple of weeks. And I think that's indicative of the interest that's out there and the fact that the architects probably have been inundated with requests for clarity and some changes to the spec to make sure everybody is clear in terms of what they're bidding. We don't know what the price is going to be when it's bid. I've been watching very carefully commercial construction across the Midwest, and I've seen it all over the board. If it comes in at 50.1 million or thereabouts, that meets the goal. I've seen projects come in 40% higher, and I've seen projects come in a little bit less than what engineers and architectural estimates are. You don't know until those bids get opened on December 22nd is the current date. So everything is kind of predicated on those bids coming in a reasonable at a reasonable level. If they don't come in at a reasonable level, then that creates a whole different scenario that is going to have a lot of conversation within the community. Right now, if we focus on, I guess, the premise that let's assume those bids are going to come in within the ballpark, and the council is going to be in a position where they have to make some decisions quickly. There's a lot of challenges that the council will have to deal with, and I wish again that we'd had representatives here to do that. I'll put a plug in for next week's show. We're going to have that conversation with the city manager and others in a forum we're doing next week at the Tallman House Museum Complex here in the city, and maybe we can get some more clarity there. All of your planning to date is really predicated upon this project going forward. You mentioned, Bill, that when this was first presented, it was presented as a public-private partnership.
Right.
And I remember asking the question, how much money can the private sector raise? And we had that back and forth, and we focused in on
You're
that target.
sitting in the council president's chair.
Yeah.
And the number for us was 7.5 million. He said, "Bill, do you think you can get there?"
Yeah.
I said, "I don't know, because 6 million's the most that's ever been raised privately here. We're at 10 today."
Yeah.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, that is amazing. The capital stack is one of those things, it is what it is. And we'll have to see how all of that balances out. Studies would indicate that youth participation in sports is actually on the decline. And that's something that as a trend is counterintuitive to where we want to head in terms of maximum utilization of the facility that's created. Duffy, from your perspective, what does one do to optimize the use of the facility from a youth sports perspective? How do we revitalize youth sports and make it something that's going to be a true addition and something that we can count on happening?
Well, here's the thing. The proponents of the center have said correctly, anytime you build a new facility, it can be used for any uses that it's capable of. So I used to say with our sports complex, it was like going from standard def to high def TV. Like you didn't know what you were missing until you had it, right? So we had a new facility. Our concessions boomed, mostly because people could go to they were all right there. They're 5 feet away from the concession stand. They got people tugging on their sleeves, that kind of stuff. So there can be benefits to building a new facility that you can't really quantify. However, the studies for this facility, and I've read them all and I revisited them today to try to remind myself what I saw before. They basically say, look, your tournament use is a weekend type use thing, and you're gonna be limited to how many tournaments you can run. 10, 12 tournaments a year, something like that. So your primary user is gonna be the local user. And if the local user is the local user, like for baseball, softball, I was the president of JYBSA at the time. So the survey people called me and said, will you use it? And my first question to them was, what's it going to cost me? Because if you can't tell me what it's going to cost me, I can't tell you if I'm going to use it. Because I have alternatives in this town. I have the field houses. I have private places I can go. And by the way, if you build this place and it charges $250 an hour for a turf field, somebody else will build a turf field at $150 an hour and immediately kneecap what goes in here. So I mean, I think what I have not seen in the discussion about like build a building, whatever you want to build. I don't have a problem with that. As an accountant, as somebody who's run businesses like this, I look at the pro forma and go, the city said we have a current subsidy of $50,000 a year. Have the consultants just come up with projections that get us close to that. And it's guesswork at the very, very best. It might be very good guesswork. It could be flat out wrong though. And I have a couple examples. JPAC would be maybe the best example I could give you of a facility in town that was built with a business model that was, if we build it, they will come. If we build it, the user groups will show up and they'll start using it, and other people will show up and everything else. And it was flat out wrong, just a bad assumption. Because I was on that board for 9 years, and the whole 9 years I was on that board, it was dealing with the fallout of wrong assumptions going in. And so they have survived that. But how have they survived that? Not because the user groups turned around. The user groups were like Janesville Little Theater and other places that were using it. And I have no criticism of any of those groups. But the idea was the new facility will help them be better. It wasn't. It was they would have a tournament, or they would have, not a tournament, an event there, and they would be in a 500-seat theater with 25 people there going, we feel like we're not a success, something like that. Now, a sports facility like this is not the same thing, but if you have softball going on, you can't have soccer going on. If you have soccer going on, you can't have other things going on. So it's a one-off use. And I see leagues being planned. I don't see a demand for, I have a kid in the local soccer program. I don't see a demand for an indoor soccer program here. I don't see a huge demand for indoor baseball and softball stuff. I hope I'm wrong about all this. I would love to be the most wrong person in the room about all this stuff. But I just don't see it. And I think there's a concept of price elasticity that if you ask the people if you ask the city, what's it going to cost me to rent this place out? They can't tell you the answer. And if their projections on tournaments and concessions and other revenues fall flat, which they could, because I think in every assumption that I've read in this about what it's going to cost us to run it and what we're going to have for revenues, everything kind of has a rosy sheen to it. That's about as polite as I could say. Like I look at some of these numbers and go, I don't know how you're going to generate this activity. And if you do, great. If you don't, then you're going to have the Jets, and you're going to have Janesville Youth Hockey, and then you're going to have what else? And I think on the idea that people like to have activities when they go to tournaments stipulated. They do. But a lot of people who travel for tournaments, they would walk this mall with their kids once, and that would be it, probably. I mean, that's in my experience going to lots of tournaments, because people who go to tournaments know how to kill time, because that's what they have to do. Could these things all be realized? Yes. Has anybody in the city of Janesville, on the city staff, ever operated a facility like this? No. Are we trusting them to operate it? They haven't even told us who's going to operate it. I think it's an important question to answer before you put this out for bid. Who's going to run the place, and how are they going to run it, and what are their thoughts about it? And I've raised that many, many times, and nobody seems to answer that question. But I think some of the people have ideas about, well, there's going to be a third party that comes in and runs it, and they'll do well with certain things, but they're not going to run the whole thing. So I don't see a cohesive view. I don't see, like, building a facility, if you think it's going to, finally answer your question, or get one other example. We built a sports complex for baseball and softball, thinking, well, we'll be able to go younger. We went younger. We added people to the program. But our gross numbers dropped over the years. over the 10 years that we were there. Why? Because the internet is still interesting to kids endlessly, and they have other activities to do. So I do agree that youth sports in general are diminishing. I don't know about hockey. What I would say about hockey is it's universally understood to be, it's not, there are a lot of sports that are expensive to play, but hockey's kind of one of the most expensive to play. And so I have concerns that, like, if you build a new facility, you're not going to suddenly have a lot of extra players playing because it's still very expensive to play. They're already not in it because they can't afford it.
Okay. I'm going to take on a few questions out of the audience at this stage, and I will paraphrase the questions because it's easier to summarize the question. So if you feel like I've brutalized your questions, during the break you can twist my arm and I'll come back to it. And in fact, I guess I'm being told we're going to take a brief timeout, and when we come back from the timeout, I'll start addressing individual questions, and we got a bunch. If you haven't had a chance to turn your question in, grab a question card, fill it out, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you again for attending tonight's Rock County Civics Academy program. Our ability to provide these presentations is solely dependent upon the financial support we receive from our sponsors and you, our faithful listeners. Our presenting sponsor is Havana Coffee on Milton Avenue. This program would not be possible without the ongoing support of the Italian House and Big Radio, WCLO, WJBL. Supporters include Ragnar Ltd. and Ragnar Software, the John Westfall family, Dan Plushik's Janesville News Report, American Awards and Promotions, Stockman Property Development, LLC. If you believe in our mission, we welcome your financial support. Materials explaining our mission and financial support opportunities are available at the registration desk or by visiting our website, commonsenserockcounty.org. Back to you, Rich, and if anybody has any questions, wave me down. I'll get them up to Rich.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to combine a couple of these questions into one, and these are open to all of you can participate. It is a group conversation. The Janesville Jets have had the same marketing area since you've been here. That's 15 years.
Yeah.
And attendance has been, your best year was, according to the numbers, I guess 2013, 2014 was the strongest attendance. And it's had somewhat of a downward trend. Going forward, you're building a facility with a 1,500 seat arena, and I'm not sure if that includes standing room or not. How are you going to maximize that from a Jets perspective and further from a youth sports perspective? The question comes down, are we overbuilding or underbuilding? What's the right number, Bill?
Well, we're financially incented to be successful, right? Because we're going to kick in $100,000 a year to the operations of this, above and beyond what we put in the capital stack. So if we don't hit our targets, that comes out of our pocket. So 1,500 seats, give or take, versus 1,150 right now. Can we fill it? Yeah, I think we can. I think people want to go someplace nice. I think someplace affordable for their family. It's one of our core missions, the affordable family entertainment. I think that passion exists here in this city. You know, someplace to go with your kids, take your wife, have a couple of pops and a nice Friday or Saturday night. I think that you don't have to drive to Janesville or to Milwaukee or Rockford or Madison or Chicago. You can do it right here. So, you know, these are kids that you might see in the NHL one day, or you could see them with a Wisconsin Badger jersey on one day. And, you know, I still believe that this is a sports town. I believe that to my core. John's been here his whole life. He knows that. And I give him credit. He's building he's in charge of another really important project for the community, the Children's Museum. Right? So I see this community moving forward. I think it wants to grow. That's why I've been so passionate about it. That's why I put in so much time and effort to try and get this to this point. And I'm betting on myself. I think we'll be successful.
Yeah. One of the things that has been talked about, Bill, and you raised it, is potentially bringing in some of the other minor league teams from the area to utilize ice time. Is that still something that you're looking at? I know you have a huge interest in hockey across the region.
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces of this. I have pretty significant connections with USA Hockey and also obviously with the North American Hockey League, which has 3 properties. It's the NAHL where the Jets play, it's the 3HL where the Oregon Tradesmen play, which I'm also an owner in, and there's also the North American Prospects Hockey League, which is youth programs. That NAPHL travels around. They just did a major event in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago. They'd never done an event in New Hampshire before. Why? Well, New Hampshire's a new member of the North American Hockey League, so they brought an entire event out there with 32 teams from around the country. That same thing would come to Janesville on a weekend that the Jets wouldn't be here. We'd be gone on the road somewhere so that the facility could be full. Those are the kinds of things, or whether it's the Central District Championships or it's the National Championships. We've had those in Wisconsin, believe it or not. We've had them in Fond du Lac, we've had them at Cornerstone and Green Bay. Why not Janesville? Central District includes Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, Nebraska. I mean, what's more centrally located, than Janesville? A heck of a lot easier to get to than Fond du Lac. No offense, they got a nice facility. But I think this would be much more attractive. The Illinois teams, they run massive tournaments a couple times a year out of Chicago area, and they often run short of ice. And the ice costs in Chicago run anywhere from $400 to $500 an hour. At $250, this will be much higher than we currently pay all users. It'll be much higher for sure, but it'll still be less than Madison. Madison's 300 plus per hour for their ice time. So I think there's a lot of reasons that people will want to come here in addition to walking around, and what hopefully one day again will be a very vibrant mall that has housing and all kinds of stuff, mixed use, right here.
I think the key is optimizing the use of the facility, making sure that for every potential hour of availability, it is in fact booked with somebody coming in utilizing the facility. And that means all 3 elements of the facility: the main ice, the part of the year ice, and the convention center itself. Question from the audience, Bill, and you mentioned it: the Jets are going to provide $100,000 a year in payment to the city as part of the agreement that you have. What's the ticket prices impact of something like that? Are ticket prices going up?
It still has to be affordable.
Yeah.
Will the ticket prices go up? I'm not going to deny it. They will. But it has to be incremental, to use Duffy's point about elasticity. We can't double them, right? So they'll go up a little, for sure. But you're going to be in a much nicer facility with greater amenities. I mean, that's been our push on this. We want it to be warm. Number one, if you were at our game Friday night, they didn't turn on the heat. It was brutal in there. We want people to be comfortable, so they want to come back. Not everybody in this town is a hockey fan, but they are an entertainment fan, right? So we need casual fans to come back. And in order for them to do that, there has to be amenities. There has to be big, clean bathrooms. There has to be fun activities during the games. And, I think that'll all be part of it. And you'll have Milton High School based out of here, and you'll have the Bluebirds based out of here as well. So, Duffy's got a couple really good points. Can we grow hockey here? Maybe. It's grown since we came 15 years ago for sure. This wasn't a hockey town. It was a baseball and basketball town. Sorry to you football fans. That's how you were known to us in Madison. But I think hockey's come a long, long way here. And I think we're now on the international map. We got a kid from Japan on the team this year.
Let me go back to the beginning, because you came to Janesville in 15 years ago?
2009.
For some very specific reasons. And you're right, Janesville is not noted at then or even now as being a hockey town. What brought you to Janesville, and why? Why do you continue to hang out?
So Blaine's just did some, you can find it on the internet, where I talked about this, but my wife had a lot to do with this. We were going to do a junior hockey team for sure. Janesville was the town because you had self-contained media. You had a daily, 7-day-a-week newspaper. You had your own radio stations. You didn't have a lot of competition on the weekends for entertainment, right? Those were sort of core to the whole business model. And then Janesville, General Motors announced they were closing a year early. I thought we could do this for a year and build the fan base before they closed, because that was their original announcement, and Tim worked his tail off trying to keep him here. Thank you for that, and Paul Ryan and others. But when they pulled the chute early, I didn't think we could do it. And my wife comes downstairs on a Saturday morning, she can tell I'm pretty depressed, and she said, what happened? I said, they're closing early. I don't think we can go to Janesville. And she didn't miss a beat. She said, that town needs you now more than ever. So I called Mark Cullen, who was the other major investor at the time, and told him what Carol said, and he says, if you're in, I'm in. I said, let's do it. So we were the first new business in Janesville after General Motors closed, and we're pretty proud of that. Not a big business. We don't employ a lot of people, but we I think, represent the community pretty well across the globe and have done a lot of good things for the community, and that I'm really proud of.
The success of the Woodman Center and the long-term success of the mall, are they intertwined?
I don't think so.
So let's do the worst-case scenario. What happens to Uptown Janesville if this project doesn't go forward?
The project doesn't go forward, we have our work cut out for us. But we also have a very valuable piece of property sitting on the front of our property. So I think that there's an opportunity.
Everybody goes into these things with a plan A and a plan B.
I'm very optimistic, and I'm always a positive person.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at the glass as being half empty, I look at it as being half full. When J.C. Penney's left, I think one of the comments I heard was, this mall's going to hell in a handbasket. And that didn't happen. I mean, we're still here. We have Dick's, we have Kohl's, we have Ulta. And I think with this Woodman Sports Complex, we're going to be able to bring more mixed use to this community. And I think that this property is going to be thriving again. It's going to be a property that kids will want to come to.
One of the criticisms of how this project has moved forward is the fact that Rockstep Capital has been pretty quiet about their plans for the future. And is there anything that you want to do tonight to break that what's seemingly a tradition of silence is golden?
Well, the reason a lot of times that developers don't talk about things that are coming in the future is because we wait for that signed document, that lease that's signed, before you make an announcement, because you never know what's going to happen. Look, it happened to this project. It was moving along really well in 2017, 2018, 2019, and then COVID hit. And then everybody put the brakes on, and stuff didn't really pick up again until 2022. So things happen in the world, and you just have to kind of wait and see what's going to happen. But I think that Rockstep has a really good track record of going into small communities like this and redeveloping their properties. And I'm very optimistic about what's going to happen here. We've still kept on our Dick's. We've still kept our Kohl's. We've moved forward. We've worked with local tenants. I would still love to work with local tenants. I think that that's important, have some local businesses in here. So I think it's all in how the people in this community want to keep supporting this property. Because if they don't support it, then it's not going to succeed. The people who live here have to support it. And as Bill referred to earlier, we were one of the largest property tax contributors in this community.
For years.
For a very long time. And we are not that person anymore. Our property is not that property anymore. So if the city wants to see our property taxes go back up, we need to do things like this. We need to improve this property and bring things like this to the community. And that will bring that revenue back up. This property also contributes a lot to the sales tax. And that's for your police, your fire, those types of things.
Well, I'll make the correction there. Sales tax doesn't go to police and
Oh,
fire.
that's right.
It goes to the county.
County,
It goes to the
you're
county,
right, but
you are a huge contributor to the sales tax. and I'll
sales
give you
tax
that,
and
absolutely.
property taxes, yeah.
Bill?
One of the interesting trends that we're seeing throughout the country in malls is for a long, long time, local businesses couldn't afford to be in the mall. Well, now they can. And so with time, I think, and especially with the fact that there's no place to locate right now, if you have a retail business that you want to start, or you want to grow and have a bigger location, there are no vacancies. There's vacancies here, so it gives them an opportunity to start being able to serve the local businesses. We call them mom and pop, no disrespect, but that's just kind of how we see it, as that's the commercial real estate slang for local companies.
You know, there's always the people who say, show me, I want to see the money. Is there a project out there that Rockstep has been involved in that you would hold out as an example of how you can revitalize a mall that has been on a decline like this one?
Yeah, Rockstep purchased Riverwalk in New Orleans.
Which is an incredible facility.
It is, but it was run down and it needed a lot of upkeep, and I just visited the property earlier this month, and it's beautiful. Cruise ships dock there, and they go in through the facility. There's a lot, it's an outlet mall, but it has very nice retailers. It has Coach, Kate Spade. It's got everything you can imagine. There's so much to do. It's connected right to the convention center, which is also a help for them because you can walk through the convention center, take an escalator, and get right into the property. So, and all those people that come off the convention or off the cruise ships go right in through the property, and right now they're working on revitalizing the Spanish Square, which is there's a big fountain area out in front of that. So that's what they're working on for 2024.
So there are examples out there where things are in the turnaround phase, and if we have doubting Thomases, we can go online and we can look at those things. There is a project in West Des Moines, Iowa, that I have been watching over time. It's the Merle Mall is a project very much like this project, and they have been struggling to keep it afoot and moving forward. And it's interesting the parallels that exist there. The last word I have is they are finally going to start moving forward. They've had to do some interim things to make it regain the momentum that it had lost on the whole pattern. So these things beg the question, you've got to be in this for the long haul, don't you? Duffy, I want to ask you, well, the youth sports complex, you did that with a lot of study and a lot of analysis, but also on a wish and prayer. What made it work as well as it's worked?
Well, I would gently respond that I don't think we did it on a wish and a prayer.
Okay.
Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. Because we didn't move until we knew we were going to have to put $500,000 into the old place to renovate it. So we knew we were going to have to come up with $500,000. But the old place was landlocked, was limited to 4 fields, couldn't grow, et cetera. But we knew our operational model, and we knew we made money every year. So we knew what our revenues were, we knew what our cost structure was, and we knew if we have more fields, we'll have a bigger facility to maintain, but if we can scale it, we will have more revenue and grow it. Now, we went out there, after we went out there, and I attribute this to the management of the organization. So the management was all volunteer run. We didn't have an executive director or staff or anything like that. And the city's proposing that the city would have, this is in the 2019 study, 5 full-time salaried people working at this place. So they should have a better chance of doing better than we did. But they've never run a facility like this before, so I don't know who's looking at what they would be doing. But we knew what our basics were, and we knew if we can add more players, we'll have more player revenue. We consolidated our fundraiser to do 1 raffle, which became the 3rd largest raffle in the state. So we kind of knew, hey, we're going to make $75,000 to $100,000 a year. So we kind of we have a simple business to run, but we knew what it would be. So we knew when we were going to the city and proposing this, and we, like Bill had the same, I had an experience like Bill did, maybe a little bit worse, because I was going on the radio to announce we have a $2.5 million capital campaign for the sports complex, and 5 minutes before I went on the radio with Stan, Jim Lute from the Gazette came on with a breathless report saying, we just got word they're shutting down the 3rd shift of the plant. This was April, I think, of 08. And so by December of 08, it was closed, and we're going to our groups going, hey, we're trying to raise $2.5 million, and it was screech, it was record scratch, like it's impossible. So we went through all of that, but we knew at the back end we were going to manage it, and we were saying to the community at that point, because we were still saying, hey, is the community going to put $1 million into this thing? And that felt like nobody in the community wanted to spend any money on anything at that point, because everybody's losing their jobs. And we said, whatever, if we can assure you one thing, we can assure you that we will never come back to the city and ask for an operating subsidy, ever. We will figure it out. We will never come back. So we're not gonna be in the taxpayer's dollar. There's a couple things that on this project that I think the city should consider, that I don't think it's considered yet. One is capital reserve for this place. JPAC had to maintain a $100,000 cash reserve, I think, for the first 5 years we were there, and that saved JPAC's bacon. Because it forced the board to maintain that amount of cash. If they hadn't done that, they probably would have invaded that cash and run into end of operations. So that's an important thing. But we knew we were gonna survive, if not thrive. What happened is, we survived, we thrived, the revenues have grown, they're now doing pretty well, but they're not thriving on exactly the model they were before. One thing they did recently, I negotiated the lease with the city, and I insisted, we have to be able to shut down this side of the park. We're renting it, we can lease it, we can keep people out of it. Why? So we can charge for parking. So we only charge for parking, we were gonna charge for parking, we never did it. They finally started doing it 2 years ago, and it's like a $60,000, $70,000 a year revenue stream for them. So thank God they finally, there's a couple things that you want for years and years as a business owner and a manager, like, we should do this, guys, and you gotta convince other people to do it, and they finally do it. So they're healthy, but we knew going in that we would be healthy, and we knew coming out we would be okay. What I don't see in the planning, every plan I've seen for the operation, so the profit and loss statement for this facility, budgets a $50,000 a year loss. That's in 2019, that's in 2022. Why is that happening? Because the city is saying that's what we currently lose on the ice arena, so let's budget for that. But on the revenue side, it's sort of projections based on what the ice time is and what the Jets' projected demand is and what JYH's demand is. And then it's like guesswork, because what conventions are coming here? What are they gonna pay for it? What leagues are gonna use it? What are they gonna pay for it? It's just complete guesswork. But meanwhile, the expenses are fixed. Not fixed, but you know what the utilities are, and you know you're gonna have staff and that kind of stuff. If you do not cover that nut, so to speak, and you are left short, the city's subsidizing that for $50,000. But if the city's off by a factor of 10, and it becomes a $500,000 loss a year, now you're gonna have taxpayers screaming. And now you're gonna have taxpayers going, wait a minute, this was supposed to be $50,000 a year net loss, not $500,000. And now we have to find revenue somewhere from the city to throw at this thing instead of at other things that we're doing. So I would prefer to see some kind of business plan that assures the community that won't happen, because I think it's important for the viability of the facility. I think it's important for the viability of the people that use the facility. And I have nothing but awesome respect and admiration for everybody who's involved in trying to raise the money for this. But I'm paid to give advice to businesses all day, every day. And when I see something and go, I'm not sure that I agree with these projections, I have a job to do to say that. And that's all I've really been saying throughout this process. We should have a new 2-sheet ice arena, and we should have had one 15 years ago. Easily. And I was at a city council meeting where we were in the middle of our sports complex project, and 10 years ago they were trying to raise money for a different project for the ice arena. And Larry Squires went in and said, hey, we want to change the location. The city council said, no, we're not going to let you do that. And I was like, my internal child was raging at the city council saying, I cannot believe you are doing this to private equity that's trying to go out and raise this money. So I think we need a 2-sheet ice arena. What I just don't get is it's $50 million and it's here, when I think, like, you could hedge by building it less expensively. You could hedge by putting in other conditions, and you could give the taxpayer more assurance that you're going to be closer to breaking even than running at a deficit that could explode. And if it does explode, it's bad news politically, and it's bad news for the user groups all the way around.
It is certainly challenging. I have to remind folks that one of the public commitments with this project is the Visitors and Convention Bureau has pledged to cover the first year, or the deficit for a period of time, a number of years. And I don't know if they put a cap on the amount. I think it was somewhere between $70,000 and $100,000 a year that they would put forward in the project. And that's assuming that the feasibility study numbers are truly representative of how the operation is going to play out. The capital stack is one thing. It's the long-term operation then that becomes a critical part of the equation. As a major user, you've got a vested interest, obviously, Bill, in this being a success.
Right.
Do you have the horses to make sure that from your perspective, the Jets are contributing 110% to the success of the facility?
Yeah, we'll do our part. I think Duffy raised a pretty good point about, who manages it, right? And is it an outside vendor, is it the city? I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I think a public-private partnership is probably best, so that there's people like Duffy overseeing, making sure that the decisions are being made correctly. I would tell you the new city, the manager of the rink, Jesse Buchholz, new guy, he's run a multi-sheet facility down in Arizona. He's a young man, if you haven't met him. He's gonna be around a long time if we can keep him. But he's got a young family looking for things to do, right? Right now, he can't find housing in this town, which is another thing that has to get addressed. So he's living just over the border, but I think who runs it is going to be critical to the long-term success. There are vendors out there that run these things and just extract their money, and those facilities don't end up doing well, and all the user groups suffer. We got to make sure we do everything we can to not get one of those if we're going to go with an outside vendor.
I asked those specific questions of the city manager in a different forum where I was interviewing him. And he indicated to me that they're looking at all the options. They had no clear decision made in that respect. I also asked the city manager, how are you going to segregate the funding and the operations of the facility from normal city operations? And he said that it would be part of an enterprise fund and it would have to make it on its own, to the degree that an enterprise fund can survive on its own without going into city coffers. There hasn't been a lot of decisions made from City Hall yet that are crucial, I think, to this project's success going forward. Not the least of which, the city hasn't made a commitment on funding yet. The council is scheduled to deal with potentially awarding a contract the first meeting in January, and they have no funding in place to support the construction contract that would come out of that meeting. Does that bother you as a user, Bill?
I would say the city has made thousands of decisions to get to this point, mostly related to construction, but there's been a significant amount of time spent on the financials from outside consultants. These aren't numbers that we drafted ourselves or that the city drafted. I would say if you're a taxpayer in the city of Janesville, you're pretty well served by your city staff. They work hard, really professional, really hardworking, really sharp, and they're trying to do the right thing. And so I tip my hat to all of them. We've gone through really 3 city managers, including the chief as the interim, on this project, and they've all been helpful in one way or another. And I think Kevin Lehner's a keeper. Hopefully he'll be here in Janesville for a long time. And there are still decisions to be made. I won't deny that, but to get to the point we're at right now, it's been a pretty impressive team effort, public-private, and that's what you would hope for in a community is, the private sector and the public sector can come together to benefit the community, and I think that's where we're at.
But can I ask a question? I mean, it's one thing to build a building. It's another thing to operate it. And the city's had notice for 5 years that it's gonna have to operate this thing. And why can't it make that decision about how it's gonna do it, and who's gonna do it, and what it's gonna take? Because I'm general counsel for United Ally here in town, for those of you who know it. And we have a customer who famously built I think a $200 million production facility, and some consultants from McKinsey said, well, somebody else will come in and run it for you. And they actually did that, and they ran it for a few years and said, we can't have a third party running our production facility, we're gonna have to run it ourselves. And so, that's just a private sector example, but I don't understand how they can project 5 full-time equivalents and no marketing people and say, well, JCVB is gonna do all the marketing for this place and get tournament people to come here. It seems like it's such a fundamental question that anybody who's a stakeholder in this place would want to know, like, how's it going to happen? The fact that it's not been addressed to this point is mystifying to me. So do you guys have insight on why they have delayed that decision to this point?
I think they're still exploring their options. I don't know if Julie has anything to add to that, but I think they're still exploring. And that'll have to come quickly, right?
I was going to say it has to come quickly, and the city just finished its deliberations on the 24 budget going forward, and I scratched my head because I've gone through that budget, all 157 pages, multiple times, and I'm not finding anything meaningful addressing the issue of the Woodman sports facility at all in that budget. There must be a lot going on behind the scenes, or hopefully there's a lot going on behind the scenes, because the success of this is really dependent upon some basic questions getting addressed. Who's going to operate it? How is it going to be operated? As it stands right now, I believe the operations agreement has the city of Janesville as the holder of the liquor license to serve the alcohol needs of the convention facility, and I'm not sure how it affects the ice arena, but the city of Janesville is in the current arrangement in the operating agreement between the Jets and the city. They're the holder of the liquor license, and frankly, the city is not legally able to hold a liquor license.
Correct.
That's one of those issues that somehow has to get rethought and brought back to the council to address. And if you dig into the agreement with any depth, there's a number of those sorts of things that they're unclear. Are you comfortable with that operating agreement, Bill?
So let me say this about the liquor license, if you don't understand it. Today, I'm the liquor license at the Janesville Ice Arena, not the city, because it's a single premise, so the Jets can have it. So when we have activities there, we can sell, it's a Class B license, so we can sell beer or wine. In the new facility, if I held the license, by the way, that's still on the table, then it couldn't necessarily be operational for a convention. 2 boxes down, right? There's 3 boxes in this facility. So the city thought they could hold it at first. They now realize they can't hold it, so we're working through that. You know, maybe there's a new entity that holds that liquor license, but it's a detail that impacts me.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Right?
It immediately impacts you.
For sure. So that will have to get worked through, but that the thought initially was, it's not that the Jets didn't want to hold the liquor license. We didn't have any problem holding the liquor license, but the convention center part is going to generate a lot of liquor sales on its own, right?
I want to ask a question again. This one comes from the audience, and there's a lot of news that's been made with the deal that came about in the legislature to support improvements to Miller Park and to keep the brewers in the area for a long time. And part of the funding stack that makes all of that possible is a tax on players' salaries. How are the Jets players compensated, and how does that relate how does that relate to this particular?
They're amateurs, so in order to maintain their NCAA eligibility, they can't get any financial assistance. The way USA Hockey works, there are 3 tiers of junior hockey. The USHL is tier 1. The closest team would be the Madison Capitals. The NAHL is tier 2. That would be the Janesville Jets, the Chippewa Steel, and now the Wisconsin Wendigo. Those are the 3 Wisconsin teams. We were the first Wisconsin team in that now almost 45-year-old league. And then there's tier 3, which is pay to play. The difference between tier 1 and tier 2 is pretty simple. If you play for the Madison Capitals pay for your son to live in someone else's home. If you play for the Janesville Jets, you as a parent pay for your kids what we call billet fees. That's the primary difference between the two. The other difference is we don't buy their skates. The USHL team does buy their skates. Everything else we pay for, me and my partners. So it's a desirable place for kids to play, and it's an easy path to get to Division I or beyond. Or potentially move up to the USHL the following year, which we have probably more than any other team. So our kids can't get paid. They don't get paid. They desire to be here because their dream is to play college hockey.
Let me dig a little deeper, and I don't want to go so deep into trade secrets, but the business structure of the Janesville Jets is such that you're not a major league owner's situation in as much as the cash flow is such you can't participate at a higher and greater level and contribute at the multi-million-dollar level, Bill.
Well, let's just say in 15 years, it's break-even's a good year.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Explain a little bit about how you finance the Jets. Because it's something that in the community, there's all sorts of considerations and thoughts about how this works from a reality
There's
perspective.
4 revenue sources.
Yeah.
Sponsorship, we have unbelievable partners here in Janesville, some from outside Janesville, many of whom have been with us all 15 years. That is our #1 revenue source. Without them, we couldn't exist. Number 2 is what we call hockey revenue, which is camps. Generally, that's kids trying to make our team, but in some cases, that might be youth. We have 8 youth teams underneath the Jets called the Junior Jets. A lot of Janesville area kids have played on those teams over the years. So hockey would be number 2. Beer and merchandise would be number 3, but it's not as big as you might think. And then tickets are similar. You know, we have to move the ticket needle for this thing to work. We have to have, you know, 850, 900 in there on an average, hopefully with multiple sellouts per year in the new facility for this thing to work. But that's a revenue line that has not been as productive as we needed it to be, but we've continued to go because of the other 2. I mean, sponsorship and hockey revenue have done really well.
So fair to say that this is not a multi-million-dollar corporation that is got a deep pocket and can participate at a much higher level than what's being proposed.
Our annual budget's around $800,000.
Yeah, okay. And that's fair. And I would suspect with youth sports, is it big, small, from what the youth baseball budget is on an annual basis?
It's been a few years since I was on that board, but last time I was on it, I think we cash flowed between $500,000 and $750,000 a year, something like that.
Okay. So it's reasonably comparable. It's reasonably comparable. A couple of more questions from the audience, quick, as we're getting down here. How often would you be bringing in the junior teams that you talked about, Bill? And have you approached other ice arenas in the area, or are they competitors to your ability to bring in those other youth sports teams?
So the home of the Junior Jets today is Verona.
Okay.
And that's where the organization was started. The Junior Jets actually existed before the Janesville Jets, and they were called the Madison Stars. Dan Shakti, the late Dan Shakti, and I founded that organization. Once the Jets were formed, we converted it to the Junior Jets. But the idea would be to have the Junior Jets run out of Janesville, right? So that's a spring, early summer program. But then we also have fall teams, 3 at the midget level that would run mid-August through high school, which is the first week in November. So that could easily be done here. None of that is done in Janesville today because there just isn't the ice for that. But we've had discussions with the Verona facility who, I think this week they opened up their second sheet
Okay.
to co-host tournaments, right? Under the Junior Jets brand in the spring. So, you know, you could have one level in Verona at 2 sheets, you could have another level in Janesville at 2 sheets. But you could bring in many more teams doing that. So, you know, the managers of the Sun Prairie facility are very open. They've got 2 sheets as well. So I think there are some regional discussions rather than competing with each other on how we can, you know, benefit the game and bring more people in the spring and the summer and give kids opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise.
So there are those potential, and again, it goes back to the idea of optimizing the use of the facility.
Right.
In order to make it successful going forward.
Yeah, the base of the Junior Jets predominantly is Madison area kids. Why? They have more kids, right? I mean, there's just more kids playing. But if we had it located here, that would help grow the game, and it would give kids down here who don't currently have the opportunity to play what we call AAA in the spring, that opportunity. And I mean, ultimately, the goal would be that the Bluebirds win a WIAA state championship down the road. I mean, we've had those discussions with Janesville Youth Hockey about how we tighten that partnership to the point where we're both focused on the same goal, right, which is the community. But it should end up in a state championship for the Bluebirds at somewhere down the road if we're doing this right. It has for Verona 3 times.
Technical question, can you host a hockey tournament and host an event in the convention center at the same time?
Yes.
From a
Yes.
logistics perspective? And everything is separated out in terms of entrances and security, and all of that is possible.
It is.
Okay.
Plus, the convention center business is during the week
Mm-hmm,
in many cases, so
Exactly.
yeah,
they complement each other.
yeah, okay.
But you could have a big Saturday night thing here at the same time the Jets are playing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Another question from the audience. Looking forward, the approved budget in the approved city budget doesn't deal with the Woodman Sports Facility in any meaningful way in any one of the 150 odd pages of the budget for 2024. We're talking about the council having to potentially approve bids in January. There's no funding in place to do that. Your thoughts, does that make anybody nervous?
You were the city council president, but I think it's tucked into their KIP that they've approved previously. The Community Improvement Program from a couple of years ago, when they had the tentative vote on the 17.3 million.
It's in the capital improvement plan, but there's no funding within the capital improvement
Yeah,
plan.
the thought is bonding.
The thought is bonding, and
Right.
bonding is about a 8 to 12-week process. So if we decided to do it today, it would be March or April before we would be in the bond market.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what we're hoping
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
groundbreaking is
yeah.
late February, early March.
So they need to push off that contract signing until we have dollars in place would be one
I
argument.
can't imagine they'd go
yeah.
forward without that.
Yeah, I can't either, and that's one of those technical impediments that somehow has to get resolved between now and this thing going forward. In the few minutes that we got left, I want to just run down the panel and ask this question. This is a huge project. There's pros and cons to it. There's incredible potential here. Bill Mears, let's start with you. What has to happen from a commercial building perspective for this project to be successful and have the impacts on the commercial market that you're envisioning it's going to have? What has to be in place to make all this potential become real?
Woodman Center.
The Woodman Center, yeah.
Isn't that the correct answer?
Well, where are we at with our infrastructure to support development? Where are we at with the planning necessary to actually fulfill what needs to be done to make this work for the community?
Well,
Because again, if you go to the current comprehensive plan that the city is in the process of finalizing, there's no mention there either.
I guess I'm like a lot of the people in the audience. I've been following this in the paper. I've not been directly involved in the whole planning. I've committed, I pledged money for the project. I'm working with local businesses that are already making plans and have already spent money. We just sold a lot, a 2-acre lot for $2 million on Milton Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about value here. So that's my perspective on it, is that it's already impacting. What I don't really know a heck of a lot about, that I've been listening to intently with everybody on the panel, is that have been more involved in the project.
And I get the sense that as soon as the city has its approval processes in place and its ducks in a row, you're ready to rock and roll.
I think it's already rocking and rolling.
Okay.
That's my point.
Whether they come along for the show or not is
Yeah,
rock and
I
roll.
hope it happens,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
even if it doesn't,
Yeah.
the people who made the investment have already made it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're making it because of what they consider, when I'm talking to my clients, is this is a done deal. It's going forward.
Okay, Julie Cubbage, Rockstep Capital. Come hell or high water, you guys you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I'm here.
What should we look for from Rockstep as the best indicator to the community that you're in it for the long haul?
Well, this building is 50 years old, as we just talked about earlier, and so I envision some more improvements to the exterior and interior of the property. And just the partnership with the Jets and the city and having this project go forward and the success that it will bring to the entire community. I think once they break ground, I'm gonna be a busy girl.
Duffy Dillon, youth sports is critical to the success of this. You still have a handle in the youth sports world. How is the partnership, how can the partnership be cultivated so that they mutually benefit this project and youth sports as a whole? What can we do going forward?
I think the key to a facility like this is having it used 24/7, 365, or as much as you possibly can. So however you find the use, I'm agnostic about that. I don't care if it's hockey, I don't care if it's soccer, I don't care what it is, it's gotta be used. When I see the proponents talk about it though, it's like, well, it could be used for hockey, or it could, not, well, the hockey's obvious, but it could be used for lacrosse, it could be used for soccer, it could be used for baseball, it could be used for other things. Those things are all mutually exclusive. You can't do them all at the same time. So when I hear about that, I go, well, how much revenue can you generate from that activity, and are you covering your cost or not? And to me, there's reasons to hedge and there's reasons to be conservative on what you actually get from that, because until you can tell user groups locally, what's it gonna cost me, you're gonna have no demand because they don't know. Nobody's gonna sign up for, if I sign up today and it's gonna cost me $1,000 an hour in 5 years, no, I'm not doing it. So I mean, you have to know. And since they don't know, it's a challenge to even predict what will happen. But key to my thinking is what you will see, this is my projection. I hope I'm wrong about this, but what I think you're gonna find is the facility is basically being built for out-of-towners, in my judgment. Bring people to town, bring people here, those people will generate economic activity, that will have secondary benefits, et cetera. To the extent that you're serving the Janesville community, you are shifting activity from downtown, the ice arena, to out here, which is good for out here. It could be bad for downtown. And you may be increasing the usage from the ice arena perspective because you're gonna have 2 sheets and you'll have more people coming out here. But the local people coming out here, it's like going to the sports complex. Like, I'm going for practice, I'm going home. I'm not coming out here and spending more time or doing anything. So where that economic activity comes from, it seems to me, is coming from mostly from out of town. And I hope people are right about what the place will generate in terms of activity and interest. But the reason to hedge would be, if this place is a booming success, why would Madison not build one? If this is a booming success, why would Rockford? I mean, so the competition will always be there. So the concern is, what does that turn out to be? And so it's always shifting, and you got to have management that knows what's going on and is paying attention to that and is nimble and responsive to it, which is why I'm kind of sitting here as a citizen going, I can't for the life of me understand why the city has not decided who's going to operate it or why, and why they're not, like, some of the consultants say, if you are building a place like this, you need to have your staff in place marketing it when you break ground. Well, we're going to break ground and not have any plan for that, apparently. And that gives me great pause. Like, it'll be built and hopefully people will catch up, but I think it's a monumental ask of people, and I'm concerned about it.
Okay. Bill McCoshen, you get the last word.
Thanks for coming out on a cool night. It's already winter, for sure. I want to give a shout out to my original partners, Mark and David Cullen, Billy Kennedy, Steve King, Tobin Ryan. Without them, this wouldn't have been possible here 15 years ago. My current partners, Joe Pavelski's been with me the whole way, plays for the Dallas Stars, and Tim Berry, one of the owners of Village MD out of Chicago. Without them taking a chance, trying to help these kids achieve their dream, we wouldn't be here. So lastly, I'll say this, to the friends of the indoor sports complex, Christine Rebow, Sabrina Syker-Bowerman, Larry Squire, who's been an unbelievable fundraiser. He is our money guy. Oakley Ryan, Sean Kennedy, Sean Knott, Dan Jensen. You guys have put in an unbelievable amount of time. I mean, if any of you were at the Forward Janesville dinner a few weeks back, 800 people roughly in there. Angela Pakes talked about this community comes together and solves big challenges, and that's what this is. And they're going to do the same for John West Falls Children's Museum, and it's what I love about this place is we figure out how to get it done, right? I think it's good to have guys like Dillon who are a little bit skeptical about the numbers. We got to keep an eye on that and work our way through that to make sure that the thing does work. But if we are not building this for the kids here, then we're not doing it right. This is for the kids.
Thank you. Bill Mears, pleasure always to have you here.
Thank you.
Julie Cubbage, thank you on two levels. One, your participation, and two, the fact that you very graciously opened up the doors to the Uptown Janesville facility and let us use it tonight, so thank you very much for that. Duffy, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate the fact that you do play that watchdog role on behalf of the taxpayers, and that's a critical role that we all need to be listening to. Bill McCoshen, is always an absolute pleasure to have you aboard, and thanks for taking the time and coming down on a cold night in Wisconsin. It's kind of ice skating weather, if nothing else. I'm going to do this, and it's a shameless plug for the future. Next week, same time, 6 o'clock, different location. We will be at the Stonehouse at the Tallman House campus here in Janesville. We'll have the pleasure of the company of the city manager of the city of Janesville, and we'll be talking very specifically about many of the questions that have been raised tonight in the hopes that we can bring some further clarity to all of this. Because frankly, it is crucial for the community as a whole to keep the pulse on where we are going. And it's the role, I guess, of the Rock County Civics Academy to try and keep people informed, to be transparent. Our goal is to make sure that everybody in the room gets informed, they get involved, because you can make a difference in your community. If you want to continue the conversation, we do it every Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock at Havana Coffee. Love to have you join us. Otherwise, it's been a great night. Thank you so very, very much. Good night.